"You don't look local." That's all it took. No weapon, no crime. Just a black woman walking down her childhood street, and a white cop who decided that was suspicious enough to stop her. He called it a routine check, but we know what that means. A loaded stare, a demand for ID, a threat disguised as procedure. But here's what Officer Halvorsen didn't know. The woman he just tried to intimidate was a former Navy SEAL, a battlefield survivor, trained in more real-world combat than he could even spell. And when he grabbed her wrist, she didn't strike. She redirected. With one silent move, she made a cop fall in front of the entire neighborhood. No punches, no push, just the weight of someone who stood taller than fear itself. So let me ask you, what state are you watching from? Where you live? Does standing still while black still count as resistance? If this is your first time here, welcome to Mr. 7 Stories, where calm dignity hits harder than any headline. Like, subscribe, and follow us. Because now, let's see what really happened on that sidewalk in Midway Crossings. The late afternoon sun cast golden streaks across the cracked pavement of Midway Crossings, stretching like memories that never quite stitched themselves closed. Warm air drifted past rusted iron fences and chipped porch railings of aging homes. Everything here seemed trapped in time, while the people had long since moved on. Kira Langston walked slowly down the worn street, a sand-colored duffel bag slung over her left shoulder. No uniform, no insignia, just a fitted black t-shirt, faded cargo pants, and sneakers worn thin at the soles. Yet every step she took, every steady breath drawn from her chest, carried a weight that made strangers turn their heads. That walk, that gaze, it wasn't the look of someone returning home to rest. It was the look of someone still fighting. The only difference now was that the battlefield was inside. 7 years had passed since she last set foot in Bridgeton Heights. Not since her mother died. Not since she signed her name on the dotted line to join the SEALs. The years that followed were a blur of sweat-drenched missions in Kandahar, Mogadishu, Fallujah, places where even sunlight could become a deadly trap. And yet, standing in the neighborhood of her childhood, where every brick still whispered the past, her chest felt heavier than it ever had on any front line. Jean's Quick Mart was still there, the same tilted 2-4, one soda sign flapping in the wind. 2 doors down, the old barbershop sign was barely legible now. Wells Park Court, where she'd once practiced free throws under skin-burning noon heat, still echoed with the shouts of kids chasing one another like the world held nothing but basketballs and laughter. She passed Mama Della's catfish kitchen. The smell of crisp fried catfish filled the air, making her stomach clench, not from hunger, but from memory. She didn't know exactly what brought her back this time. Maybe it was longing. Maybe it was just to see if the place that once called itself home would still recognize her. But the moment her boots hit that pavement, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't the same person anymore. A group of teens stood clustered near the corner of Jean's. One boy looked up at her, his eyes lighting up with recognition. "You in the military?" he asked, no fear in his voice. Kira met his gaze, her tone low. "Something like that." The boy nodded, smiling. "My cousin just enlisted. Hasn't been gone long. But you've gone farther." Before she could reply, his friends called him inside the store. She stood there for a beat. That moment, that recognition with no introduction, no rank, reminded her why she still kept walking. Whether it was on a battlefield or through the heart of a hometown that never truly found peace. The boy disappeared behind the door, and Kira kept moving. The evening wind carried the scent of hot asphalt and red dust, weaving through the fabric of her shirt. She tightened her grip on the strap, her pace steady. And then she heard it, that familiar sound she knew all too well from combat zones, the deliberate, slow roll of tires. A patrol car from the Bridgeton Heights Police Department eased quietly up to the curb, its tinted windows reflecting sunlight like a warped mirror. The old Crown Victoria didn't belong in this neighborhood, because here, cops didn't stop. They blared sirens, hit the gas, and vanished. Kira didn't look, but she could feel the stare coming from inside the vehicle. Her instincts told her this wasn't a routine check. The window rolled down. A dry, superior male voice rang out. "Hey you, mind stopping for a sec?" Kira turned her head. Standing before her was Officer Brent Halvorsen. White, mid-40s, buzz cut, mirrored sunglasses, and a watch on his wrist as large as a hubcap. The way he leaned his elbow on the doorframe, collar slightly open, with a smug expression that screamed, "I'm used to being in charge." "Is there a problem, officer?" Kira asked, her voice calm. "Just a quick check," Halvorsen replied, tapping the steering wheel lightly. "We've had a few break-ins around here lately. You live nearby?" Kira raised one brow. "I'm walking down the street. The street I grew up on. That a problem?" Halvorsen snorted, his crooked smile visible just beneath his sunglasses. "Well, you just don't look local." A simple sentence, but the implication and bias stained the air like oil on white fabric. Kira didn't react. She'd seen men like him more times than she cared to remember. The kind who thought a black woman walking alone was enough to justify suspicion. "What's in the bag?" he asked, eyes dropping like he could see through the canvas. "Personal items. Mind if I take a look?" "No." Not loud, not defiant, just one word, sharp and clean as a trigger pull in a SEAL operation. Halvorsen rested his arm on the window, exhaling like he'd been personally offended by her composure. "I'm just doing my job, you know, keeping the neighborhood safe." "Safe from who?" Kira asked, her eyes locked on his. The question hit like an invisible slap. Halvorsen stopped smiling. His breath grew longer. The mood shifted from vague to clear. He wasn't looking for answers. He was looking for obedience. "Let me see your ID," he ordered. Kira didn't move. Her eyes scanned the surroundings. Quiet corner, a few locals inside Jean's Quick Mart. No imminent danger, but one wrong move could spiral quickly. Slowly, she reached in her pocket, pulled out a slim wallet, flipped it open, and held her military ID card up to chest level. Not handing it over, just letting him see. Halvorsen squinted behind his shades. "What's that now?" "Military ID," she said. "You messing with me?" "No, I served." The wind swept past them, carrying the echo of kids laughing from Wells Park Court. But in this moment, that peaceful sound fell out of place, like a painted backdrop behind a wrong scene. Kira could feel it. This moment was shifting into something else. Tense, personal, saturated with power. Halvorsen lowered the window all the way, radio in hand, but not yet engaged. His eyes now said clearly, "I'm not letting you walk away easy." And Kira knew this was only the beginning. He held the radio loosely, thumb hovering near the transmit button. But he didn't press it. He wasn't testing the situation. He was testing her. Kira Langston stood still, ID card in hand, like it was an extension of her body. The late sun cut through the trees, casting her shadow onto the pavement, solid, unmoving. "You said you serve?" Halvorsen smirked. "Cards like that, easy to fake. You can buy one online for less than $30. She didn't respond. She just stared at him, like watching a child play with a lighter beside a gas tank. He leaned in farther on the car door. "You know you're making this more complicated than it needs to be." "I'm standing on a sidewalk," Kira replied. "I haven't jaywalked. I'm unarmed. No complaints filed. So tell me, officer, what exactly is complicated here?" Her voice was calm, like someone reading out instructions for a sledgehammer. Halvorsen's smile twisted into something uglier. "You think you're smart?" "No, I'm just not used to being interrogated for walking through the neighborhood I grew up in." Just then, a beep sounded from the cruiser's console, an internal position check from dispatch. Halvorsen quickly turned the knob, silencing it. He didn't want command hearing anything. Kira noticed, and that alone made her nod slightly, a silent signal that she now held the upper hand. "Hand over the card," Halvorsen said again, this time as a command. She didn't move. "You can look. No need to touch." By now, a few people had started to notice. A middle-aged woman stood outside Jean's Quick Mart, grocery bags in hand, squinting toward them. Farther off, a group of teens sitting on the basketball court railing paused mid-game, turning their heads. Halvorsen saw it too, and like most men of his kind, he didn't retreat. He escalated. "You're being uncooperative," he growled. "I have the right to detain you for identity verification." and I have the right not to be harassed without cause. Her voice remained soft, but within that softness was a spine forged from steel, the kind no officer used to barking orders could bend. Halvorson's breath hitched. I don't want trouble, but I need to ensure you're not a threat to this community. What do you think I am? Kira asked, her voice as soft as a breeze beneath the eaves. A burglar in New Balance sneakers carrying a Navy SEAL credential? A quiet laugh rippled from somewhere in the small crowd. Halvorson glanced around. The truth was slipping through his fingers like sand, and what infuriated him wasn't her resistance. It was the fact that she wasn't angry. She was just standing there, unshaken. You're not going to win this, he said, voice dropping low. This? Kira raised an eyebrow. You mean me standing still and doing nothing wrong? That caught him off guard. He hadn't expected his random check to turn into an asymmetric dialogue, where he, the one with the badge and gun, was the one unraveling. And she didn't need to do anything but exist. And to men like Halvorson, that was the true offense. The air thickened, like condensation gathering in a locked bathroom. Footsteps slowed. Gazes no longer skimmed past. There was something in the atmosphere now, an invisible tension, that turned sleepy midway crossings into an unannounced stage. A young woman in a plum-colored hoodie stepped out of the bakery next to Jean's Quick Mart. In her hand was an old iPhone, camera already rolling, frame locked on Halvorson and Kira. No one needed to explain what was happening. You filming this, Tasha? A voice called from the bleachers at Wells Park. Every word, the girl replied, eyes glued to the screen. Tasha Elridge, senior in communications, wasn't the type to look away when the truth showed up uninvited. And today, it had walked right into her frame. Halvorson flicked a glance her way, sharp and cold like a blade. But Kira, without flinching, without turning, stood firm, like a bronze statue in the golden afternoon sun. What are you filming for? Halvorson snapped. To make sure everything stays transparent, Tasha said sweetly, her tone sugared but edged like lemon rind. A boy on a bike, maybe 10, slowed to a stop and propped his kickstand. Confused expression, wide eyes. But he didn't look away. An older man passed by, pulling his cap low, but his gaze lingered. There was something in his look, like he'd seen this scene before and knew how it would end. Halvorson clearly felt the shift. His composure cracked. The once dominant lean over the car door gave way as he stepped out. His police boot hit the pavement with a dry thunk. He took a step toward Kira. Give me the card. Last chance. You've got eyes, Kira replied. Look, that's all you need. A surprised woo. Damn, came from the food truck line. Marcus Tillman, mid-bite into a fried fish sandwich, blurted out, She's doing your job better than you are, man. Halvorson spun around, eyes blazing at Marcus, but the young man only shrugged. We're citizens, not spectators. The air had grown thick enough to choke. And then, just as the moment teetered on the edge, an elderly couple stepped out of the pharmacy across the street. Darren and Layla Brooks. He held a portable heart monitor. She carried a grocery tote. They didn't speak. They didn't shout. They simply stopped and watched. And then Layla quietly pulled out her phone, tapped a single icon, and said into the speaker, Sweetheart, start the live stream. Something's happening outside Jean's. No one knew who she was calling. But 10 seconds later, a notification chimed from across the street. A high school kid shouted, It's on Facebook Live. Over 200 people already watching. Halvorson wasn't just being recorded anymore. He was broadcast. His face flushed crimson, like someone had slapped him with something he couldn't see. He still gripped Kira's military ID midair, jaw clenched tight. His eyes burned through her like he was hoping to force a confession or a mistake. But Kira just breathed, deeply, calmly. You're losing control, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I didn't touch you. I didn't yell. I just stood still. And somehow, that's a threat to you. A smattering of applause broke from the gathering crowd. Tasha zoomed in tighter. Marcus chuckled to himself, head shaking slowly. And in the breath of late afternoon wind, something shifted, an almost imperceptible turn in the tide. Power no longer lived with the man holding the badge. It now belonged to the ones holding up their phones. Keep rolling, Tasha whispered like a stage cue before curtain rise. The sun pierced through a stretch of gauzy clouds, spotlighting the sidewalk in front of Jean's Quick Mart. In the center of it stood Kira Langston, still, silent, unwavering. Her eyes never left Brent Halvorsen, whose pride was now boiling into something worse. He had let the crowd see him falter. Let a black woman, with no gun, no threats, no raised voice, corner him into retreat. And for men like Halvorsen, that wasn't just humiliating, it was unforgivable. Turn around, he barked. Hands behind your back. Right now. No one spoke, but every camera was rolling. The live stream ticked past 800 viewers. From the corner, Marcus muttered, "Oh man, this just went nuclear." Kira didn't flinch. Her gaze wasn't angry, wasn't defiant. It was clear, centered, as if she were listening to a stranger declare war on common sense. "You really want to do this? Out here? In the middle of the street?" she asked. "You're non-compliant. I have the right to detain you. For standing still? For escalating the situation?" "No," she said. "I'm just refusing to shrink for your comfort." Halvorsen gritted his teeth. Then he moved, deliberate, fast, reaching out to grab her left wrist, the one still holding her military ID. And that was his final mistake of the day. Just one beat. One shift of motion. Kira didn't back away. She didn't strike. She simply rotated her wrist in the opposite direction of the pole, a fundamental move in passive resistance. Then pivoted her hips to the right, lowering her center of gravity. Halvorsen's grip slipped, his stance staggered, like someone stepping off a ladder that wasn't there. What did she just do?" someone whispered. "Redirect." Marcus narrated like a boxing commentator. "She's not fighting. She just redirected him." In front of the entire crowd, Halvorsen stumbled, his balance gone. His whole body swayed like a man trying to save face on a patch of ice. He didn't fall, but that didn't matter. Dozens of phones caught the moment. A police officer being moved out of power by a simple shift in weight. Kira hadn't stepped forward. She hadn't raised her voice. Her arms remained relaxed at her sides. Her gaze steady. A child giggled. Marcus gave a low whistle, and Tasha nearly screamed. "I'm filming in 4K. Good luck deleting this." Halvorsen's face turned scarlet. His breathing shallow. Both fists clenched at his sides. He had never been humiliated like this, especially not by someone who hadn't even used half a second of force. Kira tilted her head slightly. "You all right, officer?" It sounded polite, but it hit like a sledgehammer, right where his pride had already begun to crack. Halvorsen didn't respond. He just stood there, like a man who'd just lost the lead role in a play he wrote himself. And the crowd, from the fish vendor to the elderly couple to the kid holding his bike, understood. The power dynamic had shifted. "Did anyone actually call the real police yet?" someone asked, half joking. And in the middle of it all, Kira Langston remained still, like someone who'd just proven that calm composure could tilt an entire system. Halvorsen couldn't take it anymore. The rage, boiling not because he'd been attacked, but because this woman refused to fear him, rose like a lidless pot on full flame. "I said turn around," he barked, reaching behind him for the cuffs. Every sound on the street paused for a fraction of a second, then unraveled into camera clicks, whispered gasps, and the heavy breath of a man unraveling in public. But Halvorsen didn't stop. He lunged. His right hand swung out, aiming squarely for Kira's left wrist, where her military ID still rested like a silent challenge to everything he assumed. Kira didn't wait. She didn't need to. It was reflex, etched into her by thousands of hours of training, by near-death moments in Mogadishu, by nights in desert camps with enemies only yards away. She pivoted like a sail catching the wind just right, and that posture alone threw Halvorsen off. Her hand slipped under his wrist, rotating it backward along the joint's natural axis. The move wasn't forceful, it was precise. She dropped her center of gravity, rotated her hips, and in one seamless motion, Halvorsen was pulled forward like a rookie caught in his own overcommitment. He wasn't knocked down. He fell because his attempt at domination had been inverted, and the ground no longer held Officer Halvorsen steady. Holy hell! He just Tasha's voice rang out before she could even bite her lip. The phone in her hand trembled slightly as it captured the exact moment he hit the pavement, backside first, arms flailing through the air like he was grasping for the last shreds of dignity. The entire street held its breath for a beat, then erupted in gasps, whistles, and laughter that could no longer be contained. Lord have mercy! She didn't even hit him, and he still fell. Marcus Tillman laughed, doubling over with excitement. The kid with the bike clapped like he was ringside at a WWE match. This looks just like a movie. Even Darren and Layla Brooks couldn't hold back their laughter. Layla shook her head, but he didn't expect his so-called dangerous suspect to school him live on the internet. Halvorsen lay there, panting, his face flushed red, fingers clawing weakly at the pavement like he could scrape up whatever authority was left buried under the concrete. Kira, by now, had already let go. She stood still, her body completely relaxed, like she'd only just repositioned herself against a gust of wind. She didn't need to win. She just needed him to understand. Not everyone bows when barked at. Tasha stepped closer, camera still rolling. I'm telling you, this livestream's gonna hit 1 million views before midnight. Halvorsen scrambled to his feet, eyes blazing, but there were no excuses left. He knew it. Every misstep, every false command, every swing had been recorded. And now, control belonged to the people. Are we done here, officer? Kira asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. But to Halvorsen, it sounded like the closing bell of a round he never wanted to be named in. The silence after the fall didn't last long. Halvorsen rose, dust covering his uniform, but the real stain on him wasn't from the street. It was shame, crawling up his neck and settling in his ears. He grabbed for his radio like a man reaching for a life preserver. His voice cut sharp through the static. Dispatch, requesting immediate backup at Jean's Quick Mart. Female subject resisting arrest, currently non-compliant. The static hissed from the other end, but no response came yet. What came first was the crowd's outrage. Resisting who? Marcus shouted. We saw it all. She's the one who was being threatened, officer. She never laid a finger on you. Layla Brooks added, still holding her phone steady, live stream still rolling. The whole neighborhood's watching this. Halvorsen's hands trembled slightly as he glanced at Kira, then turned back toward the crowd. You're interfering with a lawful officer. I can order dispersal. Try it, someone shouted. Call your whole damn squad and see who gets dispersed. Then sirens. Not one. Two. Tasha whipped her camera toward the street. Guess he called in his boys to help him save face. A sleek black Tahoe SUV rolled in, red and blue lights flashing. No blaring sirens. Just presence, gliding forward like a lion that didn't need to roar. And from behind the tinted glass stepped a man who stopped everything cold. Chief Douglas Merrick. White shirt, crisp and buttoned to the collar. Gold badge glinting on his chest. Tie straight, temples silvered with age and certainty. Chief Douglas Merrick didn't step out of the SUV. He descended like the closing of a gavel. Not here to mediate. He came to end things. Oh Lord, an older man whispered. That's the chief himself. Halvorsen stiffened. The radio was still in his hand, but his voice faltered as he tried to regain footing. Chief Merrick, sir. I was handling a non-compliant subject. Merrick didn't stop walking. He moved straight toward the space between them, between chaos and control. His eyes brushed over Kira for no more than a second. But that second was enough. The way she stood, the steadiness of her breath, the military ID still firm in her hand. Then he turned. Who exactly are you calling a subject? Merrick asked, his voice low and steady. She failed to properly present ID, became physically resistant when I approached. Merrick raised a hand. That's enough. Then he extended his arm, not toward Halvorsen, but toward Kira. He didn't demand her badge, didn't interrogate her credentials. He simply asked, You're Lieutenant Langston. The crowd fell still. Even the birds on the wires above seemed to hush. Kira gave a quiet nod. Yes, sir. Merrick closed his eyes for a single beat. When they opened, his stare could have sharpened steel. Officer Halvorsen, he said, voice cutting through the thick air, as of this moment, You are suspended from duty. The gas from the crowd came like a wave slamming concrete. Marcus let out a low whistle. Layla clapped once hard. Tasha practically shouted into her phone's mic. Y'all, he just fired him right here on the street. Halvorsen tried to hold himself upright. Sir, you disgraced this uniform, Merrick said. No anger, just clarity. In front of the camera, in front of civilians. And worst of all, in front of someone I'm fairly sure has served this country more honorably than you've ever served this town. Then the dam broke. Halvorsen, face burning and voice cracking, lashed out. So what? Just because she's a special ops officer, we ignore the fact that she resisted? If she were anyone else, will we be having this conversation? The words hung there, slicing through the air. Midway crossings went still. Kira took one quiet step forward. Not aggressive, not defensive, just a movement rooted in unshakable calm. You just said something right, officer, she replied, each syllable deliberate. If I were someone else, without this ID, without this training, then yeah, I'd probably be face down on that hood right now. Cuffed, dismissed, and no one would have believed me. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. The truth in her voice cracked the silence like thunder wrapped in velvet. Cameras didn't even zoom in. They didn't need to. The truth carried on its own. Chief Merrick turned toward Halvorsen once more. You are suspended. No further words were needed. The police chief turned his back and signaled to the officer in the SUV to take Halvorsen into custody. Kira lowered her hand. She didn't smile, but for the first time, her eyes softened. Not because she had won, but maybe, just maybe, because someone had finally listened. As Halvorsen was escorted away, his hands still trembling, his eyes darted back at the crowd, half smirking, half shaking their heads in disbelief. Chief Merrick turned to Kira. He didn't speak right away. He just exhaled, like he was trying to release the weight of too many years in that uniform. Lieutenant Langston, he said, voice firm but not sharp. Do you wish to press charges? The air stilled again. A few whispers rose from behind the food truck. Do it. Let him know what consequences feel like. If it were me, I'd sue him all the way to federal court. Kira looked toward Halvorsen. No longer proud, no longer hiding behind his shades, just a man who should have known where the line was. Then she turned to Merrick. The slanting rays of the late-day sun cast diagonal shadows across both their faces. There was no confrontation left, only a choice. No, Kira replied, plainly, without hesitation. Merrick raised a brow. You're not pressing charges? No, she repeated. Then after a pause, she added, just loud enough for the people in front to hear, for those behind to catch, and for the live stream to capture. I didn't come back here to make anyone bow down. I came back to stand tall. And I think, today, I taught him a lesson he won't forget. A gentle breeze rustled dry leaves along the sidewalk. No one spoke for a moment, until a slow ripple of applause began. Layla Brooks clapped first, then Marcus, then the group of teens from the basketball court. Not because Kira had won, but because she didn't need to win the way people usually do, through lawsuits, retaliation, or court battles. Chief Merrick gave a small nod, his gaze softening. He'd seen plenty of people use power to crush others. But today he witnessed someone so powerful she didn't need to use it, yet still made the whole system shift. I'll open a full internal review, he said, and I promise this won't get buried. Kira nodded once. I'm not going anywhere. I live here. The words were light, almost casual, but they sent a ripple through midway crossings. Tasha Elridge whispered into the live stream. Some folks don't come back to run from the past. They come back to guard it. Across the street, the vehicle carrying Halvorsen disappeared from view. But the shadow he left and the consequences of his choices would linger on this street for a long time. As for Kira, she turned and walked away. No rush, no glance back, but the entire block watched her go, as if it was that quiet strength that would stay with them longest of all. The sun had dipped behind the old oak trees that circled the neighborhood by the time Kira reached 119 Ruston Lane. The weathered white-painted house stood unchanged, its creaky porch groaning in the evening breeze like a tired old Southern greeting. She set her bag down on the step and sat, leaning her back against a post whose edges had been worn soft by time. The back door clicked open. A tall, familiar figure stepped out. Uncle Vern Blake, faded khaki pants, a flannel shirt with only half the buttons fastened, worn-down leather shoes. One hand held a bottle of iced tea, the other clutched a sweat-soaked rag. "You still sit like that whenever something's weighing on your mind," he said, his voice raspy from 30 years of smoking before he finally quit. Kira didn't need to turn around. "Still remember that, huh? You're my sister's blood." "How could I forget?" He handed her the tea, then eased himself down onto the step beside her. Neither of them spoke for a while. They just sat in silence, looking toward the road that led to Jean's Quick Mart, now swallowed in twilight, the dim yellow glow of street lamps lingering like memories that refused to fade. "You made it to the screen, you know," Vern chuckled softly, unscrewing his own bottle. "Tasha Elridge went live. Got to see nearly the whole thing." "I didn't plan on being famous," Kira replied, her voice heavy. "None of us do. Things like this, they choose you. You don't get to choose them." She nodded, fingers tightening slightly around the neck of the bottle. "Do you think I did the right thing?" "You did what needed doing," Vern answered without pause. "And most times, what needs doing ain't what people like, but makes them think." The wind stirred the porch again, carrying the earthy scent of old wood and ivy crawling up the fence. Kira glanced down at the step, where her father used to sit, his old sandals always placed beside him. "Sometimes I wonder whether any of this really changes anything," she said softly, "or if it just fades like all the other stories." Vern inhaled deeply, then nodded slowly. "You're not asking that because you doubt. You're asking because you hope." "Hope?" "Yeah. Hope that someone in that crowd today, a kid, a cop, or just some bystander, remembers how you stood your ground without bowing. And next time, when they see something wrong, they won't turn away." Kira looked up at him. "You always think deeper than you look." Vern laughed. "Gray hair don't come from the wind, sweetheart." They sat in silence again, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was the stillness of two generations, one who once stood on factory floors, the other on foreign ground, looking out at a world they couldn't control, but could still influence. "Not every fight needs to be won," Vern said. "Sometimes you just have to stand long enough so folks see that not everyone gets knocked down easy. And sometimes that alone is enough to move the world a little." Kira smiled. For the first time that day. It wasn't a wide smile, but it was real. The next morning, just as sunlight began to cast a golden hue across the weathered wooden porch, Kira Langston was already up. Boots laced, that same familiar duffel bag slung over her shoulder. At the doorway, Uncle Vern lifted his cloth cap in silence, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. "Heading out again?" Kira turned, offering a faint smile. "Not running. Just continuing." He nodded, as if he understood, and the truth was he did. Some people were born to stay still. Others, like his niece, were born to keep walking, with or without a map. She stepped off the porch. The pavement felt quiet beneath her soles. No sirens. Jean's Quick Mart was still open down the block. The smell of fried catfish from Mama Della's drifted gently on the breeze. The same boyfriend yesterday was riding his bike near the basketball court, slower this time. Their eyes met for a second. He nodded, just a small nod, but it carried the weight of unspoken understanding. Across the street, Tasha Elridge stood talking to someone, maybe a classmate. Her phone wasn't recording anymore, but her eyes still followed Kira. Not as a bystander filming a moment, but as someone beginning to recognize her role in a much bigger story. Somewhere else in town, Officer Brent Halvorsen now sat at a disciplinary board table, maybe defending himself, maybe feeling regret, maybe trying to deflect blame. But one thing was certain. He would never forget the gaze of a woman who didn't need to raise her voice to make the whole world turn and listen. And Kira, she wasn't looking for victory. She knew yesterday didn't dismantle the system. Injustice would still happen. Officers like Halvorsen would still exist. Suspicious eyes would still land on women like her, black, strong, unflinching. But maybe because of her, someone would hit record a little sooner today. Maybe today, a young officer would hesitate before issuing an unjust command. Maybe today, a child would stand tall instead of bowing their head. The world didn't need to be changed all at once, just nudged. And sometimes that nudge begins by simply not moving from where you stand. Kira Langston kept walking, not because she had to, but because if no one steps forward first, no one ever finds out how long they can truly stand. Not everyone can change the world, but everyone can move it just a little. And sometimes it all begins with refusing to bow when you've done nothing wrong. No shouting, no fists, just standing at the right place at the right time and not backing down. The story of Kira Langston is a reminder. We can't control how others see us, but we can control how we respond. And sometimes that calm defiance is what forces an entire society to stop and reflect. What about you? Have you ever witnessed injustice? Have you ever had to choose between dignity and safety? You're not alone. Drop a comment below. I've stood still before. Because sometimes even a whisper is enough to stir an entire city.